I got to admit, the end of the Fever-Mercury game made me sit up for a second because it got a little spicy with Caitlin Clark having an interaction with DeWanna Bonner out on the middle of the floor, sort of waving her back to the bench. I mean, the rest of the game was following a familiar script where the Fever fall behind and they fight back and they show the grit, but they lose to a team that has more talent than them at this point in time. But that interaction stood out to me for a couple of reasons. I mean, number one, obviously, is the history there, where DeWanna Bonner was on the Fever for a cup of coffee and then winds up on the Mercury. That after, before the season, Caitlin Clark said she wanted to win a ring for her, right? Like she said, I want to win for her. And Caitlin Clark went out of her way to also, shine light on how DeWanna Bonner had risen up to the top of, near the top of the all-time WNBA scoring ranks. And then, it's kind of a, this is the thanks I get sort of moment. But here's what I'm talking about if you missed it at the very end, because it was a late game, and I wouldn't blame you if you started falling asleep early in the game either, considering the way that it was going at one point. But there was an exchange between Bonner and Cece out on the middle of the floor, and Caitlin, basically, they were arguing about a foul call because Lexi Hull got called for a foul on Bonner. And Bonner is looking back here, as you can see. And Caitlin comes out on the floor. Basically looks like she's complaining to the refs, like she typically does. And then Bonner's mockingly doing the challenge symbol. And Caitlin sort of waves her back to the bench. And Bonner doesn't like that. Caitlin stands her ground. And they go back to their respective corners. And then, there's a shot of Caitlin after that sitting on the bench. But what's interesting to me about it is those like competitive juices are firing with Caitlin Clark. And the way that her return has been talked about, and I'm not saying this means anything for her return, of course, we still need to see her practice and all those things. But the way it's been talked about, it's like so vague and so meek in a sense. And then you see her stand up like that, and you see like the tunnel fit she's been rocking the last couple of games. Like there's an aura, an air of confidence. I mean, maybe it's just, she's comfortable in her own skin no matter where she is. But it did make me like, for a second there, if she's that fired up on the bench, that into the game, where she's willing to go out on the floor and talk a little smack. So either way, at worst, it's a viral moment. And then there's the game itself, which got away from the Indiana Fever at the end of the first half, really. But this was a game where only a couple players played well. Lexi Hull had a really good game. Lexi Hull is just she just plays hard. See her with Sabali here, leaning in. You can still see the black eyes on Lexi Hull. Gets that little fadeaway to go. And then Kelsey Mitchell was terrific, and she's been basically terrific all season long. But Kelsey had it going again early, and this team was carried by Lexi and Kelsey in this one. And then pull up, hold that. Just a lot of highlights from Kelsey Mitchell early in the contest. But that was about it from the Fever side of things. I mean, you look at the box score, nobody else really did anything. Aaliyah Boston had a tough night at the office. She had a well-rounded game, but she missed too many bunnies right at the rim. That was a problem for the Fever all game. Too many bunnies right at the rim. That at the end of the first half, Natasha Howard only played 18 minutes on her birthday. I thought Brianna Turner played well, for sure. Brianna Turner had a good game. And then on the other side, I was really impressed by Natasha Mack of the Mercury. She hustled her tail off in that one. She really brought some juice for Phoenix. She was fun to watch with her energy out there. Alyssa Thomas had another really good game. Some turnover. It looked like Alyssa Thomas was going to fight Kalia Copper. A couple times she threw it up to her, and Copper wasn't ready. They weren't really on the same page. And it looked like Thomas was a little ticked off. These things happen within a game, but you got to give Alyssa Thomas her credit. She played well in this one and really asserted herself physically, a little too dominant physically for the Fever. DeWanna Bonner also had a good game. She got away with a blatant travel at one point. Sammy Whitcomb was big for the Mercury as well. So Phoenix wins the game, which I wouldn't have been surprised by going in. Of course, that's not a shocking sort of development. I expected Phoenix to win the game. The familiar script. I mean, we could play the blame game if you want. The Fever are going to make the playoffs, whether they won or lost this game. It's about seeding. Now the seeding is getting interesting with the Golden State Valkyries smacking everyone that they're playing, including the New York Liberty. Valkyries obliterated the Liberty, who are also struggling. Or, the Valkyries are, double-digit lead at least in the fourth quarter. So they're moving up. They could even catch New York, which is crazy to think about. So they're in the driver's seat now for the sixth, if not even the fifth seed. The Fever still in that battle with the Storm and the Sparks and however that shakes out. I don't really have anything new or enlightening to say. If you want to criticize the coach, you can criticize the coach. The run at the end of the first half was where the game was lost, in my opinion. I thought the Fever were losing this game going in on the road. But that last bit brought a little life to things. Not only the Fever fighting back in it, but again, Caitlin Clark being so feisty in that moment. I don't want to make too much of it, of course, but it does make me go like, all right. If she's feeling like that, she's got to be feeling a certain type of way. And that's ultimately like the whole, and I'll talk about this more on my live, the whole dynamics behind the scene. It does make you scratch your head off on, what's going on. The same vague statement being, going out for 2 months straight. But when the chips are down, there's really one person who should have the power in this entire dynamic, and that is the one who's the most dynamic star in the sport and who has changed the trajectory of women's sports and women's basketball, right? Like, so the decision will fall with Caitlin Clark, or should fall with Caitlin Clark, or if she decides to make it fall with Caitlin Clark, she should be able to have that sort of sway. Regardless, it's not as if that means the Fever are going to hoist a championship trophy or anything like that. And certainly the mood was worse earlier in the day. And certainly overall, it's a bad day when you hear Caitlin Clark hasn't done any contact practice and the Fever lose again. I'm just saying, I'm looking for something. And that spiciness was intriguing to me.